Bet. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Greer, thanks for stepping into the fray on this. There's a lot to be done. As you would see, the last 4 years, there's been very little done, and this committee on a bipartisan basis has been incredibly frustrated with just the lack of a phone call coming in to say how we're cooperating together to figure out how we're going to do trade policy and how we're going to do the next place. And as you've heard several of my colleagues already say, a lot of us have ag producers that have a great product the whole world wants to buy, and USTR has not been helping us find new markets to be able to do that. So we're counting on you to be able to do that. If you can't do that, we're going to ask your son to step in and take over and to be able to take that on, because clearly everybody looks well prepared in your whole family. So I'm glad everybody's here. So let me ask this. When you step in to this role, there are several things we've already talked about, one of them being the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords countries are still asking the same question. What's the benefit of being here? And one of those things should be trade. One of those things that can be done is how do we trade better? How do we form better trade agreements? And so the next country that wants to join the Abraham Accords knows if you join, here's the benefit of joining this club. How do you start developing some of those things to be able to make sure that that can be done?
Thank you, Senator. And I know that this is an issue that's important to you, and we had a good introductory conversation about it in your office. Yeah. One thing that's interesting about some of those countries, we have existing trade agreements with Jordan and Morocco, for example, right. and so we know there's a pathway to have good trade relations with these folks as well. Again, I'd go back to some of the discussions I had earlier with I think with Senator Bennett, where the president has directed let's look at existing trade agreements and let's look at markets where trade agreements might be helpful, and let's do it in a way that's coordinated and pragmatic. And so I think that if this committee and you believe that we should be looking at some of potential Abraham Accords members as areas where economic growth can happen for Americans and American workers in a good way, then we should talk about that.
Okay. Well, the focus is there on good foreign policy for us and good for Americans as well. And establishing peaceful relationships across the country allows us to have better trade agreements and better economic activity on it. So we want to continue to be able to drive that messaging home. China's been dumping product. You and I talked about this a little bit in the office as well. I appreciate that. The big challenge that we have on China dumping product is not just that they're dumping it, it's that the process that you have to go through to be able to challenge the dumping of that, how many millions of dollars it takes to be able to challenge that.
Leave me alone.
And then who actually enforces that? Now, I know this falls largely to the Department of Commerce for the enforcement of this, but one of the questions that's going to come to you is, how do we help our companies that know Chinese products are being dumped on them and are killing the market have a better response, and what pressure can you put as while agreements are going on with the Department of Commerce and trying to be able to prosecute those? How do you actually put additional pressure to make sure it stops?
Thank you, Senator. And yeah, this was a great topic of conversation. I know you're concerned about it. As many on this committee know, dealing with unfair imports from China is what I do. It's what I've done in the private sector. It's what I do in the public sector. And so one thing that the president has directed, he's directed the Commerce Department to look at the dumping laws and see if they can be improved to better serve American companies and workers. With respect to USTR, if I'm confirmed, I would be committed to look at other unfair trade practices that maybe aren't captured fully by the dumping laws to see if we need parallel actions going on at the same time to make sure we resolve every aspect of the problem and not just some of the technical dumping issues.
Okay, that'd be helpful on that. There's also been some conversation of late this week dealing with packages coming in from China and how those are going to be handled. This is an area that I'd just encourage you to work with CBP. There was a pilot agreement that was established in 2019 to see if we could actually manage some of this. That pilot program over the last 4 years has exploded and is dramatically changed how we're handling the de minimis issue in USPS. So again, that's not firmly in your area, but it's definitely going to be a trade area that we've got to be able to figure out how to be able to make sure they're paying their fair share of what they should be paying, especially those packages that are coming in from China, as a significant amount are. One other question that I have for you, you and I talked about in the office, when you're negotiating trade agreements, you'll hear many of us talk about the power that you have. Countries want to trade with the United States because we produce great products and our manufacturers are tremendous at what they do, and they put out a good product, and everybody, the whole world wants it. But that also means when you sit down with them, if people say we want to open up a trade agreement, people are going to want to talk about many of my colleagues are going to talk about labor agreements and how we're making sure there's unfair labor practices, what we're doing to be able to make sure that we're not having unfair competition. But we also have standards in there for things like religious liberty and a free press and all those things. So I would just encourage you, you are an ambassador in many ways on many issues. And when you sit down on trade agreements, you have the ability to be able to sit down and to be able to press countries around the world that are oppressing their people on issues like religious liberty, and to say, if you want to trade with us, we want to trade with you, we want to be fair trade, but we also want to see some action in your country as well that begins to balance out our people trading with your people, that we also know that you're respecting things like labor rights or free press or the freedom of religion. So I'd encourage you just to be able to take that action as well, while you're also watching out for American workers.
Thank you, Senator. We'll be sure to align with the State Department, who is very good on these issues, to make sure that all of our messaging is aligned to encourage the kind of standards and values we would expect.